This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen. Content presented on the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent views of the Whole Care Network. Always consult your physician for medical and fitness advice, and always consult your attorney for legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Have you ever met anybody that has caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in life?
Beyond caregiving, how do we care?
We also have to care for ourselves.
How do we treat friends, family, strangers we meet?
Forget it.
How do we heal? The physical, social, financial, spiritual.
Hello.
By creating healing ties. Tying it all together like a bow tie. With your host, Christopher McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Christopher McClellan, and you know me as the Bow Tie Guy, and welcome to another episode of Healing Ties 2.0, featured on the Whole Care Network. On the Whole Care Network, we are all about story sharing and resources because we believe it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And our common cause is supporting caregivers before, during, and after caregiving ends. And as you know, we're celebrating National Family Caregivers Month with the reboot of the popular Healing Ties podcast. Well, I know I keep saying this. I'm the one that thinks it's popular, but other people do too, with our 30 podcasts in 30 days. It also includes our soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website. So when you get a chance, please visit our new website at wholecarenetwork.com. Well, you've got to visit the old site to get to the new site, but you'll figure it out when you see the link. And when you get to the new site, you'll meet a friendly fellow by the name of Bo, because Bo ties things together on the Whole Care Network. As soon as you see Bo, you will get it 100%. And during our soft launch, we'll be asking our listeners to provide us with feedback on the new site so we can continue to build the site where you can easily find your favorite podcasts, favorite blogs, and videos. Oh, and by the way, you'll be able to search content on the Whole Care Network via our 4 pillars of care: physical, social, financial, and spiritual health. All of our content will be categorized in one or all 4 of our 4 pillars. And be on the lookout for our new YouTube channel featuring live shows, our streaming 24/7 radio station, and a few other changes coming to the Whole Care Network in 2021. And I look forward to receiving your feedback on the new site at wecare@wholecarenetwork.com. Well, enough from me. I am excited to introduce my guest on this episode of Healing Ties 2.0, Matt Reiners. Matt is the co-founder of Eversound, a technology company dedicated to ending social isolation for older adults by giving every resident the gift of hearing. And Matt, it is great to have you on Healing Ties. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Christopher. It's an honor.
Well, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit and seeing the awesome work that you're doing at Eversound, but let our listeners know from your perspective what Eversound is all about, and we'll get into our conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. So Eversound is really a mission-based organization to help improve the quality of life for older adults, all across the country. Right now, focusing on senior living communities. The inspiration to start this company actually came from starting a company that was helping people around the country throw silent disco events. Christopher, I have to
Yes.
ask, are you familiar with silent discos?
I am a fan of silent disco, especially on cruise ships.
I love it. And for those of the listeners that might not know what it is, imagine a room full of people dancing to no out loud music, and everything is being played through wireless headphones. And it's probably one of the most absurd things you'll come across, but people tend to love them, especially before the pandemic. But people would use them to get around noise curfews or do like multiple DJs at the same time. It's really a wild experience. And my co-founder, Jake and I have grown up together. We've known each other since we were 5 years old. There's old home videos of each other's birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah.
But him and I started this company together while he was still in college. And it was about like year 3 or year 4 into this endeavor where we saw an opportunity to create an organization or a company to do more good in the world. And really the inspiration to help older adults came from really 2 things that kind of happened serendipitously to what was going on in life. With one, senior living communities started calling us and asking for help. What they were needing and experiencing was that everyone's hearing was at different levels when it came to group programming. Sometimes some wanted the volume up, others wanted the volume down. There was not a happy medium. It created this phenomenon we like to call volume wars, which are definitely not fun.
Volume wars.
Which are definitely not fun inside communities.
Exactly.
And then around the same time, my personal experience was what I saw my own grandmother go through. So she lived in a senior living community in New Jersey for the last, 3 or 4 years of her life after she fell in her house and was on the ground for 24 hours. But really in what I experienced with her community is she wouldn't go to like social events or programs or even meal times. And the community was doing everything it could to like do these awesome events, but she wouldn't go. And what I would ask her and try to better understand like the reasoning why, her philosophy was always, I can't hear what's going on, so why should I even bother?
Right.
So she would isolate herself to her room, blast her television, or listen to her romantic fantasy novels through her own headphone system, which was definitely a different side to her. Because as I got older, realized that they were, and I actually listened to one, they are not that PG, but
No.
kudos to grandma. So
I've heard they're not PG.
Yeah, exactly. But it was out of this, that we decided to take a step back from the silent disco side of things and thought running one startup was so much fun that we decided to do 2 simultaneously, where we started to work with audiologists, gerontologists, occupational therapists to create a headphone system that's tailor-made to an older adult user and that's easy enough that care staff in senior living communities that are some of the real heroes today. And, they've got a million things going on. So how do we create something that's super simple to use and can pretty much be set up in a heartbeat? So we basically have set on this mission now for the last 5 or so years to where we're impacting over 850 communities now and really reducing social isolation and finding that hearing plays a significant role in that.
So one of the remarkable components of Eversound, and you just kind of mentioned it here, is we all have different technology skill levels, but with the Eversound product, it's so user friendly that no matter what level of technology skill you have, it's easy to use.
It is. And so we designed that with purpose because we do know that sometimes in communities, people can be, a little tech phobic. Sometimes it's definitely difficult to, if someone's been doing something for a certain amount of time for over 30 years, and to teach them a new piece of technology, it could definitely get tricky at times. But what we're finding is in designing a system for simplicity, it makes it that much easier for people to pick it up and really run with it and be successful with it. And what we find in terms of adoption and keeping things and continuing to do it, that's when we start to see the adoption rates really skyrocket in terms of creating a system. Because an older adult user, right, has very specific needs. We can't create something and then determine to put that in classrooms and auditoriums for people of all ages. Like we need something that's hearing aid compatible, easy to use, ADA compliant, antimicrobial materials, and then really creating a system that's simple enough for the caregivers to use it and use it successfully.
And I think one of the other wonderful features about this, especially in the time of COVID, is it's really helped families be able to communicate with each other a little bit better.
It is. So I wish we could take credit for kind of this idea, but basically when we launched Eversound, it was for group programming. But then we started to see communities in like the March timeframe of this year start to repurpose their group system and use it for safe family visits, whether they were through windows or partitions or even just outdoors. Because what I remember, I was talking to an executive director, and basically what she said to me is everybody has to wear masks. And if people can't really hear, they typically can read lips. But if you can't see someone's lips, it makes it that much more difficult to communicate. So a lot of these visits were leading to very, frustrating experiences when they should be filled with, laughter and love and reconnection. And they're filled with frustration and times of turmoil where it's just unfortunate. So creating a system, we launched this visitation pack to really help with that two-way communication between family members and, their residents or even care staff. We've had like doctors and, other therapists use it with residents as well. And I've actually heard some pretty moving stories from the field of people's lives just being changed for the better to be able to communicate again.
Because one of the issues that we have as we age, just naturally, is isolation. And then when we start to lose, any of our senses, especially our hearing, we tend to just isolate. It's easier to stay in your room and not have to deal with the frustration. But you've got something that's really solving this.
Yeah. And to your point about isolation and hearing loss, I think it's one of those things and one of those senses that I don't think we give enough credit to. And if you ever think about like, I'll never be socially isolated if I can't hear. But if you've ever been in a situation, whether like a noisy restaurant or just like a lot of background noise, me personally, I can only ask what someone said so many times before I just become, what was that? Can only say that so many times before I just become, standoffish, more introverted and not engaging with the world around me. And I think what we find, especially with like older adult population today is, if someone has this idea that someone can't hear, it's more of a personal problem. They need to go get hearing aids. They need to fix the batteries. They need to take care of all this. Yeah. But what the numbers say is that more 80% of people over the age of 85 have some sort of hearing loss, and less than 1 in 5 that could benefit from a hearing aid are actually using one on a consistent basis. Right. Compare that to glasses, right? Like glasses, I would imagine the adoption rates for those are 90-95%, if not higher.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things too. And I think honestly, like no pun intended, it is a silent epidemic, especially in older adults today, because hearing loss is tied to all of these negative health outcomes, like increased risk of falling, increased risk of developing dementia, increased risk of dying prematurely. That it's one of those senses where it's not so much the brain that's being engaged with, but everything between the ears. I'm sorry, not the ears that are being engaged, but everything between the ears, which would be that brain. And that's where we start to see it. And we've had some instances where we've had communities tell us, and I know this is anecdotal, I don't have any data behind it, but they're helping those that are living with dementia, and they use our product and realize within a couple of minutes, if not seconds, that they start engaging, they start speaking again. And it's not so much that the product that's doing it, but the ability to hear what's going on, that we start to see these miraculous changes. In some of these stories, we hear of people being able to talk with their loved one for the first time in years.
That in and of itself, not only is off the charts, it has so much meaning for the individual and the families as well. Because, oh my goodness, I'm just thinking of instances in our family where I wish I would have had that opportunity just to have that conversation, especially that, let's just face it, especially that conversation towards the end of life that just wasn't possible, but you're making these conversations possible, which is bringing so much happiness and joy to families all across the nation.
Yeah, and we're just grateful to play a small role and really provide an opportunity for these experiences to happen. And it's rare that a day goes by that people on my team were not crying like happy tears in terms of some of the feedback we get, because we've heard time and time again of families able to connect. And, if I'm an adult child and I'm talking to my father or my mother for the first time in a while. And we've had people reach out to us and be like, they told me they loved me. Like, I haven't heard that in so long because they haven't had to be able to have this conversation. And just
Have
like,
that. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
oh, like, and it's just one of those priceless things that will live with people for forever. And I'm reminded of one family in particular, the Thomas family, where, they've been married for over 40 years. And, for the final 5 years of his life, Mr. Thomas was living with dementia and, slowly declining. And when Mrs. Thomas couldn't take care of him, she moved him into a nearby community and would still visit him daily. And there's a video that they shared with us where on this day in particular, they used our system to play their wedding song together again. And it was a really special moment.
Goodness.
And Mrs. Thomas basically said afterwards that it was the first time in those 5 years where she felt like a wife and not a caregiver. And it meant so much when we saw that initial video. And then we eventually heard that, as is natural, Mr. Thomas passed away. But that video and that time and that time of reconnection meant so much to their family that they actually played it at his funeral. And it's just like little, it's like those little, like, it just, for all the stories we have, like just hearing that one has made this roller coaster ride of the startup world all worth it.
That those feel good stories, it reminds us why we're doing what we're doing. And we all find our own paths and our roads here. And when we're involved in the caregiving experience and journey, and the impact that you're making, and Eversound's making in this field is just it's just off the charts. I'm just happy to be connected with somebody like you. And I know, and I'm not going to embarrass you, but I do know that you've been recognized with numerous awards, and you're so authentic about your mission that it's just an honor to know somebody like you.
Well, I appreciate that, Christopher. And then that feeling is mutual. And and yes, we've done some pretty cool things, have won some pretty cool awards, but we're really here to help spark these meaningful connections in residents and really empower caregivers, whether they might be care staff or family members and loved ones. And, we're grateful because I think we all grow up with this idea of like, if you create a business, it's profit over people and stuff, which, there's definitely some truth in that in terms of a business. And of course, we're not a charity, of course, but being able to provide these meaningful experiences and these meaningful times in people's life that they will live with families forever is, we're grateful to play a small role and really help to enable those experiences. Because I always think on, if we didn't do what we do today, would that have ever have happened? And likely that it wouldn't have, which, just kind of continues to inspire that daily grind.
I just look back, it's 6 years now since I was an active caregiver, and our caregiving journey started in 2011. And I look back what was available technology-wise in 2011 as to what is available now in 2020. And I'm asking you to rub your crystal ball and say, what's the future of technology, especially as it comes to aging?
So I think in terms of aging, I think what you'll see is this level of communication has become so instantaneous, right? Like with all these apps like Twitter and Facebook. And what I think you'll see too, especially from the caregiving side, so like adult children, if they're starting to put their loved ones into communities or at home, they will expect to know what's going on within minutes, if not seconds. It's not one of those things just calling to check up. Oh, X, Y, and Z happened. Like what happened there? I think you'll continue to see that communication and almost like this wellness tracking will be more monitored. And I think what you'll find too, which I think is pretty amazing, like there's ways to track, and like I wear a Fitbit and stuff and can track how many steps and stuff and I take in a day. But what's really interesting, I think, is when you kind of boil that down to data and you can actually start to track patterns. And I've read some studies where if people go off their certain patterns, their likelihood of falling or developing like a UTI start skyrocketing, which is kind of amazing when you can kind of think of that. But I think in terms of technology, something that we'll need to keep top of mind and present. And I've seen startups that are struggling with this. It's still working and helping people, So we can never lose sight of that. And yes, technology can, we have to use technology as a tool to ultimately become better people, rather than having this tool control us and do all sorts of these different things that that are not desirable.
It'll never replace the human element, but it will certainly aid us as we make informed decisions about care. And that's what, I'm kind of excited to be a part of the tail end of this. But, I've kind of found my niche in talking to people like you who are making a difference.
Well, thank you, Christopher. And yeah, I mean, we appreciate the ability to kind of bring our story to light and allow it to be heard by so many more people, pun intended there. So, yeah.
We're all about story sharing. Well, Matt, this is a great place to take our break. And as I'm doing with all of our guests here on the reboot of Healing Ties and our 30 and 30 podcast, I'm going to ask you to come back and think about a fun fact that I may not know about you, and our listeners would like to know. So put your thinking cap on.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Okay. You're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network, and we'll be right back.
Tomorrow on Healing Ties 2.0.
When you look at our gay senior population today, there was very limited role models to grow up with.
And within the context of coupling and aging and caregiving, that is a story not often told in our media as it relates to LGBTQ couples. And that is one of the reasons why we have been allies and partners in helping to educate and illuminate this issue for others, I think, because these stories need to be told and people need to hear them. My name is Elliot Sklar. I'm an associate professor at Nova Southeastern University in Florida, joining you today from Miami Beach. And I would love all of you to listen to our podcast.
Join us tomorrow and every day in November for 30 shows in 30 days. Healing Ties 2.0. Available at thewholecarenetwork.com/Healing Ties and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I am continuing my delightful conversation with Matt Reiners from Eversound. And Matt, I forewarned you before the break. We're gonna tap into you and find a fun fact that I'd like to know, and most especially all of our listeners would like to know about you.
Yeah, so I'll say this, Christopher, and you may not believe me, which is typically the case whenever I bring this up. And so I have never in my life had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I'm not allergic to anything, but there's just I never liked peanut butter growing up and never sought it out. I was more of a unfortunately, I hate to admit it, but a bologna and ketchup man growing up myself.
A bologna and ketchup. Okay, never a peanut butter and jelly. So you don't like peanut butter.
Not really. I've become more of an almond butter guy as I've gotten older, but yeah, peanut butter has never really done it for me.
Well,
or
you
chocolate
might.
Is, yeah.
Our chocolate? Oh, goodness.
Not like Reese's. I say I don't like Reese's, and people are ready to fight me.
See, I've not met anybody that doesn't like chocolate or peanut butter. So that's a fun fact. Now, if you told me you didn't like French fries, then I'd say, wait a minute, there's something going on here.
Well, I'm not that crazy, but a little.
Well, I like you. Well, that's part of why we do the fun facts, because we kind of have an informative and serious conversation the first half. Then we come back and we talk about something that's a little bit more personal, because we all have our own stories, and it's important to share our stories, because then we know a little bit more about each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Matt, we just have a couple of minutes left in today's episode. You and Eversound have an open invitation to be on the Whole Care Network at any time. All you got to do is just pick up the phone and say, hey, we want to be on the show. So with that, let our listeners know how they can be in contact with you and learn more about Eversound.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Christopher. So to learn more about Eversound, I would definitely suggest going to our website, www.eversoundhq, for high quality headquarters, whatever you want to put in place for that HQ.com. And there you can see various videos, different case studies. We have a bunch of free resources as well that people can take advantage of. And if you email hello@eversoundhq.com, that will ultimately make it to my inbox, or you can email Matt at eversoundhq.com as well.
Hello at Eversound. I like that.
Yeah.
That's very clever. Well, Matt, with the stories that you share and the work that you do at Eversound, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher, for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure.
Well, I hate to close this episode of Healing Ties, but that we must. And as you know, I'm your host, Christopher McClellan. You might know me as the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories, resources, and being with awesome people like Matt Reiners. Healing Ties is produced in the posh studios of Oddbox Production in downtown St. Louis, Missouri, and is part of the Whole Care Network. Check out the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website and be sure to meet Bo. And be sure to subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties, tomorrow as we continue our 30 podcast in 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye for now.
Ciao.
This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen.